East Maple. Mr. City Manager, the first thing we have is the update for the IPD issuance of body cameras. And do you have anything you'd like to frame that up for me?
I just want to say good evening, first of all, Mayor and members of the council. It's been a little bit since this council approved the contract to finally implement body-worn cameras for our police department. Because that was our first time venturing into that technology, we really wanted to share with the council what that's looked like, how we've managed it, and some of the stories that have gone along with it. So Deputy Chief Peterson is here to share that update with you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Again, I'm Deputy Chief Jason Peterson, Deputy Chief over Operations Support Bureau, which includes all of our technology and several other functions of the police department. So on our Axon body-worn camera update, this will be fairly brief, so I don't want to bore anybody with all the mundane details, but I did want to showcase what we brought on board here. In 2023, we were awarded a grant from the United States Department of Justice, which assisted in purchase of Axon body-worn cameras. And the Body 4 is the camera that we are using. That's the most up-to-date camera that Axon has. And the video quality is incredible. The audio quality is great. There are some tremendous technological advances that have been made in cameras over the years since body-worn cameras were first implemented. And to my mind, this is the best of the best. They are the leading provider of body-worn camera technology in the United States. If you go to YouTube and you look for body cam, almost all of them have Axon in the upper right-hand corner because they like to market their own product just like any for-profit business. But if you notice how good the quality on those videos are, it is remarkable. Again, body-worn cameras are devices that law enforcement officers wear on their uniforms to record video and audio during their interactions with the public. All of our uniformed personnel are issued body-worn cameras. The use of a body-worn camera increases transparency and accountability. It helps us to create a clear record of interactions between police and the public where you can get away from the he said, she said that can occur pretty frequently. This is beneficial for investigations, legal proceedings, and improving community trust. It has been used countless times already for investigations. Axon Body 4 in use by the Independence Police Department records audio and video in high definition quality, as we've seen, and I'll have a couple examples here. Evidentiary footage is wirelessly uploaded to Axon's cloud-based storage system, and it is approved for use. It's CJIS compliant. CJIS Criminal Justice Information System, so it is protected. It is a very secure cloud system. The use of body-worn camera provides clear, real-time video evidence of incidents, which can be crucial in investigations and court proceedings. The manner in which it's transmitted allows us to review it much quicker than we could with our historical dash cam in the past. It's just a much quicker transmission, and it allows us access that much faster. Recorded footage can be used for training purposes and to help officers learn from real-life scenarios. We use those in training all the time. Body-worn cameras improve trust in law enforcement by demonstrating a commitment to accountability and transparency. The video shows what the video shows. That's what happened from the perspective of that camera. We also have to recognize that what the camera sees is not what the officer sees because it's not mounted where their eyes are and it doesn't move as their head does. So there is perspective, but it's limited to just that point of view. That's why more cameras are better. Every officer on scene will have a camera, so we will review every camera that's there when we're reviewing footage. It can showcase positive engagements between officers and the community, reinforcing trust and showing that officers are dedicated to serving the public. Axon Body 4 utilizes Axon's evidence.com for efficient and secure storage, retrieval, and management of video footage. It also allows us to package footage or any other evidence and send it for public records request. It's a very quick and seamless way for us to provide information to the public where they get a secure download link and they can retrieve that information very quickly. Independence Police Department's policy states that utilization of a body-worn camera will be mandated for officers working in on-duty and or off-duty capacity. So if you have somebody that's working an off-duty job at an off-site where they're working in a security function, they're still required to have that body-worn camera. Interactions with the public are to be recorded.
I'm Officer Ford of Independence Police Department.
Hello, nice to meet you.
I stopped you for no license plates.
Obviously, I didn't want to put the entire car stop on here with all the information, but that's really what it looks like. It gives you an opportunity to see what the approach of the vehicle was. And if we needed to see driving behavior prior to that, we can go back to the in-car camera and review that as well. They're tied together. Studies have indicated that departments using body-worn cameras often see a decrease in complaints against officers, and the presence of a camera can deter aggressive behavior. It also gives us an opportunity to review those cameras and the footage, and then discuss with somebody who does make a complaint what we've seen and how it looks beyond what their perception of it was. And there are times when we can bring them in and review the camera with them, show the footage, that they get the different perspective of it, and they have a chance to step back and potentially see what the officer's viewpoint was, and also their behavior outside of their own bias. When complaints do arise, body camera footage is quickly reviewed by an officer supervisor or internal affairs officers to assess their validity, allowing for faster resolution and reducing prolonged disputes. We also use body-worn cameras and in-car cameras for review on responses to force and pursuits. Axon's smart technology automatically begins recording when the following actions are taken by an officer. When they activate their emergency lights in-car, because the fleet system and the body-worn camera are tied together, that is a trigger. So it will activate the body-worn camera when the overhead lights come on in the car. When an officer deploys their taser, that will also start the camera. Their body-worn camera is tied to the taser. This ensures key moments are captured and reduces reliance on officers to manually activate their cameras during a critical incident. You don't want the officers fumbling with the camera trying to activate it when they should be taking action that could potentially save a life. So the cameras buffer automatically, they pre-record, and that will allow you to not get audio, but you will get the video of what happened before whatever that triggering event was. Independence police vehicles are equipped with the latest in-car camera technology. Again, this is fleet. This is what it looks like from inside the car. It's a little difficult to see, but there's a pedestrian running on the highway up there. I'm going to skip this video, though.
You need to stop.
Okay, Axon body-worn cameras and in-car cameras are equipped with a pre-event buffering, as I just spoke of. The camera continuously records and overwrites footage, typically in segments of 30 seconds. And this captures events leading up to the incident. This doesn't fill up our storage because we're not continuously recording and then maintaining all of that. Officers may not remember to manually activate their camera during rapidly evolving and high-stress situations, and pre-event buffering assists with ensuring that those key moments during the incident are not missed. So one of the things that has become a challenge for every police agency is how we manage all of our digital evidence. When we have 3 cameras inside a car and the body-worn camera on the officer, that's for 1 officer on scene. Now multiply that by how many of our officers show up, and you may have 30 recordings of 1 incident pretty easily. That happens pretty quickly if it's a critical incident that brings in a number of different officers from different sectors, just because it's that severe or a really dangerous situation when it first originates, and then as they are able to peel away from the call and go back into service, as it stabilizes, then you'll lose some of those cameras, but at least for that initial incident, they'll all be recorded. So Evidence.com is a cloud-based digital evidence management system developed by Axon, and we use Evidence.com to store and review body-worn camera footage. We can add evidence to cases, securely share evidence to the prosecutors and other law enforcement agencies. One of the components that we are currently working on with the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office is an interface with their system where we can submit our cases, including all of the evidence, to them automatically with a simple press of a button inside Evidence.com cases. Once the case is ready to go, we'll be able to submit it to the prosecutor's office. They can review it, and we will get a response back that they received it and what their determination was on the case, whether they accept it, whether they feel they need more information, or it doesn't rise to the level of state prosecution and it needs to be referred in another manner. The useofevidence.com streamlines storage, organization, and retrieval of digital evidence collected from body cams and other sources. We can add, one of the things that we do is community requests, where if somebody has a Ring camera and they can upload their Ring camera, we can give them a QR code that they can scan with their phone, take any video or other evidence that they have, and submit it. So we have all of this data, and we are able to comply with all the CJIS requirements and make sure that all of our legal standards are met. And uploaded footage is encrypted. That protects all the sensitive information, such as information that's protected by the driver's privacy protection. Captured footage will wirelessly begin uploading to evidence.com once the officer enters their patrol vehicle or places their camera on a docking station. The docking stations that we have do sort of three purposes. It will charge the body camera, so we make sure that we start the shift with a full charge. It will also upload the video to evidence.com, and it provides updates to the software and the firmware that run the Axon body camera itself. So privacy considerations are always to the forefront of mind when we talk about introducing cameras to places where they normally aren't. Body-worn cameras may capture footage of individuals in sensitive situations or traumatic events, as we've seen. This footage may be subject to public records requests or court proceedings. However, privacy is protected. So audio and video redactions are made in compliance with Missouri law. When people request those videos that we are not allowed to release because they are prohibited from release by law, that's our response. That's pretty frequently met with consternation by people who want that information. And we understand that and try to explain it the best we can, but we are mandated to prohibit release of some of this information and some of these videos just based upon their very nature or where they're recorded. So examples of footage that will be redacted include juvenile subjects. Almost anything involving a juvenile is going to be redacted because they're protected. Names and addresses, phone numbers, social security numbers, and incidents that are graphic in nature or would shock the conscience. So in summary, technological advances can foster a safer environment for both law enforcement and the community by promoting efficiency, transparency, and enhanced communication. As technology continues to evolve, we'll continue with ongoing collaboration between our police department and our community and the public. That has to be in place for us to maximize the benefits while we can continue to address the potential challenges. That is all I have, but I'll stand for questions if you have any.
Any questions? Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you for your update. You always do a wonderful job. Couple of questions. You talked about how they automatically trigger. So they trigger if you remove your taser, they trigger if you turn on your lights and sirens. Do they also trigger if you're in proximity to other police officers who have their body cameras going?
Yes, a body camera or an in-car camera will also trigger.
Okay, so we should rest assured that they're going to turn on and be recording when we need them to. So that's come a long way in the tech because that didn't used to be the case. So fantastic.
Correct.
Tell me about retention, records retention. Is it different with video than it is with paper and other things, or do the same rules apply for how long you have to maintain access to these?
So we have retention categories that are based upon the incident. If it's a case where we know we may have to take that evidence to trial, it's retained until manually deleted. And that means we could have potentially forever retention on some of these things. If it's something like a car stop, many agencies don't save their video from car stops any longer than 30 or 60 days. We are saving them longer than that because you can potentially have issues that arise that you don't learn about until that retention period is passed. Maybe somebody doesn't decide to file a complaint until 31 days after. And if you've already dumped that video and allowed it to be removed from the system, then you lose that evidence. So we err on the side of caution and retaining things longer than we necessarily have to by best practices in surrounding agencies and across the country. One of the things that we didn't talk about with the body-worn camera grant is there was a technical and training advisor that we coordinated with to develop our policy and our retention. So it's not something that we just came up with on a whim. We worked through the grant process, and that advisor, who we met with several times to help develop the policy, they vetted our policy, compared it to what they would consider best practices, and essentially had very minor tweaks that they requested, and everything's been working so far.
You know, one of the wonderful things about tech is that it continues to evolve. One of the terrible things about tech is that it continues to evolve. And so, can you help me with what we need to be anticipating for replacement? I bring this up because I hear people say, well, it didn't cost that much to run a police force in the past. And I'm like, this police force has nothing to do with the 30-year-old police force because of the tech and the upgrades and the tools that you have at your disposal, which causes its own budgetary issues. So help me out.
I'm not in an entirely unique position because I was here 30 years ago. There are a few others of us that are still left, but I know what that 30-year ago police department was compared to what we are now. We were taking reports on paper, and based upon what color form you used, that's the type of incident it was, or whether you had property or people. Things are remarkably different now, and yes, technology continues to change. The contract that we have with Axon is a 10-year contract, which is somewhat unheard of with Axon and somewhat unheard of with technology in general. But it has refresh built into the contract at no additional cost to us to replace all of our body-worn cameras, all of our tasers, and all of our fleet in-car systems. That is built into the contract.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. So I'm so glad to hear that the body cams turn on automatically when you initiate, your emergency lights. I work for an agency currently where if I make a traffic stop, I got to remember to turn it on. And, well, I'm not saying I forget, but, it happens in high-stress situations, so I am glad to hear that. That was going to be one of my questions. If officers ever forget, I guess they don't have to worry about that. So before we got body cams, I always heard that, replacement costs would be high for possibly, officers. They might get broken or lost, especially if they get in an altercation with somebody. Has that really been a problem? We've had to replace cameras?
We have had a couple cameras that failed that needed to be replaced, and they are under warranty. So it is built into that contract itself. The warranty is pretty remarkable. They are water resistant. They're a lot better than most of the watches that you'll buy as far as submersion. But as long as we can get it back to Axon, we've had cameras replaced with no issue.
Okay, that's good. So, okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the officers still, though, have computers in their cars and fill out reports after incidents or at the end of their shift. Is that correct?
Yes.
So how do those reports work with the video footage? Is it just, I mean, do you know what I mean? Are they stored together or?
Not yet.
Okay.
So that's another component that we're working on with Axon. We are developing Axon Records. We'll be the first agency in the state to be using Axon Records. It's in the build process right now. And while we can put everything in a case in Axon, evidence.com now, ultimately what we will have is the report writing function will be in Axon Records. And based upon your case, it will suggest the evidence that shares the same incident number. And the incident numbers can come from two different places. It's either the officer identifies the incident number and inputs it manually, or we've recently implemented something called auto tagging, where based upon the call for service that you were sent through CAD or computer-aided dispatch, it will interface with Axon and identify, because you were here and you were on this call for service, you were assigned to it, your video is auto-tagged with that incident number. It makes it a lot easier for detectives to find the 30 videos they're looking for that may be associated to this event.
So right now, the videos are saved with the same incident report or number as the file, the manual file that the police officers have put into their system. Is that right?
Yes. So
Okay.
again, two different systems right now. Videos are stored over here. The entire case can be put here after it's created, but we are still using law enforcement records management system which is a New World product, or Tyler Technologies. We are moving away from that as we build out Axon Records. We're still about 9 months away from go live on Axon Records.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember?
Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the update. I remember when we passed this, and I think, we all had, wondered about how it was going to actually develop, and so appreciate that information, and I'm glad to hear that it went well, has gone well. Question I would, no, really the other question I wanted to ask is, has it come in on budget, under budget, above budget? How's that been?
Because it was a 10-year contract, we knew what the costs were from day one.
Okay.
So they haven't gone.
I'm just curious if there was any, adjustments or anything that.
No, it has been
Okay.
strictly under the contract.
Good. All right. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Other questions? All right. Thank you very much. Great presentation, and I'm glad it's all working, and that's what all of us wanted in this process, and I really appreciate your presentation and all the work you've done to make this work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. City Manager, it looks like we're going to talk about sewer rates. Is that true?
Yes, that is true.
All right, very good. Is there anything you want to frame it with, or?
I'm going to ask our Deputy City Manager and Municipal Services Director, Lisa Reynolds, to do the framing for me.
All right, very good.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Please try and curb your enthusiasm at getting to talk about sewer rates this evening. Just as a little bit of background before I ask our presenters to come up, the last time that the council entertained a conversation about sanitary sewer rates was 2016. At the time, they were approved, and those rate increases went into effect July 1st, 2016, and they approved 4 years of increases at that time. So that obviously then ended in 2020. We have been flat with sewer rates since then, with no increases since 2020. Obviously, COVID and then getting back to real life and real projects took priority, and now we're past due, needing to do a cost of service study. So we have asked our friends at 1898 and Company, which is a part of Burns and McDonald, to take a look at the cost of service study for us. So what you're going to see tonight are a couple of different options. And just in looking at options to fund depreciation, capital projects going forward for the next several years. We asked for options because, as you can imagine, and as you've seen escalation with every kind of project, running the sewer utility is no exception to that rule. The cost of everything has gone up. So the initial number was a little higher than we were hopeful it would be, although not really shocked based on projections that we've provided every budget season for the last 5 years. But again, not to steal their thunder, but you'll see two options, a 1 and 2. One is higher than the other, just food for thought. Also, for your information, this was presented to the Public Utility Advisory Board on July 10th. And they just received the presentation at that time, and we will ask them for a formal recommendation to this body at the August meeting. And with no further ado, I'd like to ask Alex Craven to come up and give the presentation.
Thanks, Lisa. Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Like Lisa said, my name is Alex Craven, and I'm honored to be the project manager responsible for the analysis of the sewer rate study. So for this evening, a brief agenda to walk you through. We'll talk about some industry trends and background. We find that is really helpful context when we start to look at what's happening within the sewer industry as a whole. We'll move into the rate study process that we followed, as well as the findings and recommendations from our analysis. And we'll have time for question and answer at the end, but if you have a pressing question, please interject at any time, and I can field those. When we conduct these studies, we like to take a step back and look at what's happening nationally to trends in household water and sewer costs. There's a handful of surveys and indices that track the historical increase in household water and sewer costs year over year. So you can see a handful of those surveys are listed here. We have the Water and Sewer Index, which is measured by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, or NACWA, conducts an annual cost of clean water survey going back to 1986. We have the American Water Works Association, which does an annual rate survey. And if you look at all three of those surveys dating back from 1986 through 2023, you see that household water and specifically sewer costs here are increasing roughly 5% per year. When we compare that to CPI-U, or what we consider to be general household inflation over a similar period of time, you can see that the historical increase in water and sewer costs at the household level are increasing at nearly 2 times that of what we consider to be general household inflation. So why is that? And there's a couple factors that are really the key contributing reasons. The first one being that there's a general trend in lower use per account, and that's putting pressure on variable revenue streams that make up a lot of the revenue that utilities collect. This is borne by greater conservation efforts, by more efficient low-flow household appliances and fixtures, all of which are contributing to this pressure on revenue streams. General inflation on operating costs as well as capital costs continue to outpace that of general household costs. There are more restrictive water quality regulations that are being passed down from the federal level through state agencies that are forcing municipal utilities like the City of Independence to comply with these regulations. And then lastly, which I feel to be one of the single largest contributors, is aging infrastructure that is oftentimes buried underground, out of sight, out of mind, that requires continual annual renewal and replacement. And these are expensive assets to maintain. Before we dive into the analysis, the process, the findings, and recommendation, we also like to take a snapshot and do a benchmarking analysis to show how does the city stack rank compared to a handful of regional peers. And so you can see here in this benchmarking analysis, for a customer that's using 600 cubic feet of volume per month, the City of Independence is right on average at roughly $57.50. And we'll show what this looks like at the end relative to the recommendations that we'll propose. So moving into the rate study process that we followed, when we do these types of analysis, we will largely follow a two-step process that includes the development of a financial plan, which is a detailed, in-depth look at all of the components that make up the financial landscape of the utility. The outcome of this financial plan is a multi-year pro forma cash flow that will demonstrate what the needed revenue increases are of the utility to meet future operating as well as capital costs. And then the second step is transcribing the findings of that pro forma cash flow to the actual rates themselves that utility ratepayers pay to generate the needed utility revenue. In the development of step one, which is the financial plan, we use a few different guiding principles that are kind of our guideposts to ensure that we're developing a financial plan that holds water, so to speak. The first guiding principle is to mitigate rate shock to the extent possible. What I mean by that is, instead of doing a single year really large increase, maybe followed by a subsequent decrease, followed by a subsequent large increase, we take a more programmatic, levelized approach to developing rates. The second guiding principle is to achieve the target cash reserve policy within the study period. So a few years ago, PFM helped the city develop a minimum reserve target cash policy for the sewer utility. The utility is currently not in compliance with that policy, so one of our key objectives here is to craft, we have 2 scenarios for your consideration, both of which achieve that by the end of the study period. We are cash funding future capital improvements and not relying on any future revenue bonds or GO bonds. And like I mentioned before, we have some scenarios that we use to evaluate these key performance indicators, such as funding the capital, keeping the lights on to maintain existing level of service, and meet the reserve policy. the last thing I'll say in the development of the financial plan, we have to lean on a handful of scenarios because we're developing a future-looking forecast of financials. I mentioned at the beginning that one of the phenomenon within the industry is this decline in use per account and the diminishing of variable revenues. When we look historically for the City of Independence, the count of customers as well as the contributed volume is actually relatively stable. And so what we've assumed is for the forecast that is going to continue. We've assumed 5% per year operating cost inflation over the forecast, and we are using the capital plan that was developed by the city staff, which equates to roughly $25 million in needed capital from 2026 through 2030. Wanted to take a snapshot and show you order of magnitude, but also kind of project type diversity within the existing capital improvement plan and the needs. So you can see in the red bar, these are going to be those collection system improvements, which are largely, like I mentioned before, underground, out of sight, out of mind, aging infrastructure that requires continual renewal and replacement. And then in the blue bar, you can see the treatment plant and pump station projects. What's largely dominating the treatment plant costs here starting in 2027 through 2030 is a programmatic improvement to the bionutrient removal at the Rock Creek plant. And so, like I mentioned before, that federal mandate of regulatory compliance that's being pushed down through the federal levels and the state agencies, initiatives like that are driving the needed improvement that we see here for the city. So now let's move into the development of the two different financial plans that we have for your consideration. The graph that you see here, this is the annual cash revenue requirements are designated by the stacked bars. And so you can see over the forecast period, the large cash revenue drivers for the utility include the operation and maintenance expense, external transfers, debt service, and the future funding of capital. The solid black bar running across the page is the user charge revenues under the existing rates. And then imposed on top of that in the dotted black line are the proposed incremental annual revenues to be generated by the proposed rates that we'll show in a moment to fund the future operating as well as capital needs of the utility. This option is designed to achieve the minimum cash reserve policy by 2029, which I'll get into that here more in a moment, and to fully fund all the capital needs of the utility. And here is kind of a high-level summary of option 2, which is the alternative. You can see the dotted green line represents proposed incremental annual revenues that are a little bit lower than what was showed in option 1. And the rub on this plan is that the capital that can be implemented is a little bit lower as a result of lower revenues. You can see that summarized by year and in total on the right, where it's about roughly $5 million in capital that needs to be reduced to live within this scenario, which is just a lower revenue increase scenario. So let's show a side-by-side comparison of these two options that we've developed. You can see in the top section on the left side, the revenue increases by year compared side by side, and then the target cash balance achieved in 2029 versus option 1 and 2030 in option 2. And so the bar graph on the right side with the two lines running across the page shows that in 2029, you can see that blue line eclipses that red bar, which is the cash reserve policy, and then in 2030 is in a much more healthy position, whereas under option 2, that green line just catches up to that minimum reserve by 2030, which is the final year of the forecast. And then the CIP being funded between these two options, it's 100% under the higher revenue increase scenario, and then we reduce that roughly 20% to make that plan work from a minimum cash reserve policy achievement by 2030. So now let's go ahead and turn the page and talk about what the rate impact as well as the typical bill impact is for these scenarios. So here on the screen, you can see the existing and proposed sewer rates under option 1 under the existing utility rate structure, which we do not propose any changes to the structure itself, only the rates therein. The bill that a customer receives consists of roughly 4 components. On lines 1 through 8, there is a monthly service charge that is increasing based on the size of the meter that the customer has. Line 9 is the volumetric charge, which is measured in contributed flow per 100 cubic feet. On lines 10 through 12, you have the high-strength surcharge rates. And then on line 13, the regulatory compliance fee. Of all of the rates listed, the only one that is not proposed to change is the regulatory compliance fee. That is the utility's fixed revenue generation mechanism to repay the outstanding bonds and the debt service for the utility. So the rates are good context, but what does it mean when we actually apply those rates to a customer bill? Here you can see under option 1 for 4 different customer usage profiles using 2, 4, 6, and 800 cubic feet on lines 1 through 4, what a calculated customer bill is under the existing rates and proposed each year of the forecast. And on lines 5 through 8, you can see what that year-over-year monthly bill increase would look like. So if we are looking on line 3 for a 600 cubic foot customer, the existing bill that they receive for their service is $57.21. And under the adoption of option 1, it would increase to $62.70, or roughly a $5.50 increase in 26. And now we'll show option 2, which is laid out in the same framework. So I'll move a little bit more quickly through this option, but you have the same rate components, all of which are increasing on lines 1 through 12, and then the regulatory compliance fee, which is proposed to remain unchanged. And all of the rates in option 2 are slightly lower than that of option 1, which is in line with what we showed in the development of the financial plan. And then option 2, you have the customer bill impact. We'll pick on the same customer profile of 600 cubic feet, and you can see that that bill is currently $57.21, and under the adoption of option 2, it would increase to $61.32, or roughly a $4 increase in that monthly bill, opposed to the $5.50 in option 1. So here's a snapshot of that same benchmarking analysis that overlays what the proposed option 1 and option 2 look like relative to the existing rates. And you can see based on this snapshot and this benchmark that the regional competitiveness, or the regional standing, if you will, for the City of Independence relative to the other communities is largely unchanged, although for option 1 it leapfrogs St. Louis by some small amount.
Does your graph presuppose that no one else changes their rates? So this is if everybody stayed fixed, which we don't think would be the case. So you're just showing our relative position if we change and no one else does. Okay.
That's
Just making sure I'm
that's
reading
exactly
it
right.
correctly.
That's a
Okay.
phenomenal point. And it's impossible to know exactly how other communities will increase their rates, but I go back to just what we see at the national level, going back 20 plus years, that other communities are increasing rates because they're facing similar cost pressures. And then this is my last slide to summarize that revenue increases are necessary for the utility to achieve the target ending position and to cash finance the needed capital improvements laid out in the CIP by the city staff. We've provided a couple options for how you might consider to achieve the key targets and what the trade-offs are amongst those options. And our proposal would be, or our recommendation would be for the adoption of option 1, which fully funds the needed capital improvement plan. It brings the utility into compliance with the stated cash reserve policy 1 year sooner than a lower increase option might. And then it, in general, will create a more financially resilient utility in the face of unknown future operating and capital costs. The last thing I have for your consideration this evening is the adoption of a CPI-based rate adjustment that would follow at the conclusion of this proposed rate path. So in 2031, where there is no next adopted rate, what we see working with a number of communities is they will have an automatic adjustment to their utility revenues that might increase at some rate such as CPI to help the utility maintain revenue resilience and revenue recognition in the face of industry dynamics that are continued increased cost pressure. That's purely a matter of policy for each community, and we've seen in times of extraordinarily high inflation that policymakers, utilities will push pause on that so that it does not potentially run away during times of high inflation. So that concludes my prepared material. I'm happy to take any questions you might have at this time.
Please proceed.
Alex, thank you for the presentation. Appreciate it. A couple of questions. So you talked about early on about an inflation rate of 5%, and we don't usually see CPI in that rate. So how'd you come up with 5%?
So the operating cost inflation is 5%. That is looking at historical utility operating costs, people, chemicals, commodities, energy, maintenance. Over the last 4 years, it's been pretty spiky, and it's peaked up to 10% in a single year. And so we use that to kind of levelize the forecast, looking at historic averages, if you will.
So you're saying that while the average consumer might see 3.5% or something, in this particular industry is 5% is the average increase that we would expect.
Yes, that's correct. I think I might have gotten confused in trying to answer your question. So the national average, looking at those indices, we see roughly 5% increase in household costs for water and sewer service, and that's one issue. The second is that we've used 5% as the basis to inflate the operating costs in the forecast.
Okay. And so when I back into the annual increase, I'm coming up at roughly 8.5% a year for 5 years. Am I calculating that right?
Yes, I believe so, and I think that is one of the shortcomings of just showing the dollar impact.
Right.
Part of the bill consists of that regulatory compliance fee, like I mentioned before, which remains unchanged. So yeah, you get an average increase, I believe, you said 8.5 on option 2 or option 1?
I was looking at option 1, I think, with the 6 CCF. So, yeah. Okay, all right. I think that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please proceed.
Alex, a couple of questions. So my understanding of the existing regulatory fee is that we had a consent decree from the EPA that forced us to upgrade our systems because it was not meeting environmental standards, and you never want the feds to come in and say, ta-da, we're presenting you with a gigantic bill, figure out how to pay for it. Is that my understanding of what that $12 is? And Lisa's coming to your rescue.
Yeah. Yes, so that very thing did actually happen. We were issued a federal consent decree some years ago. Our projects were actually completed shortly after I started here in 2015, but we issued roughly $90 million in debt at that time. And the original environmental compliance fee was at $3 and then went to $6, and it stair-stepped up by $3 increments until it flatlined at this $12, where it will stay until that debt service is completely finished.
And so that debt service completes in 2042, if I remember.
The last issuance, yes.
Okay.
We did some refinancing on those a few years ago that actually took a few years off the end of the first 2 issuances, but that third remains unrefinanced.
So in 2042, that falls off the bill?
It does.
Okay. And then this question will be to you as well. For the planned CIPs, these are replacement of existing infrastructure. It is not expanding infrastructure, because we have parts of our town that were grandfathered in and nobody put stormwater out there, and they still have ditches in their front yards. So the CIP plan that we have that would be paid for this would be the ones that are crumbling, now we replace, but not a plan for that other.
So just for clarity, storm is completely separate, not any part of the utility. But yes, this is by and large essentially funding depreciation. It's replacing aging infrastructure in our system and also providing the projects necessary to conform to any regulatory requirements. There are additional requirements coming down for testing things like phosphorus at in the treatment process. We don't know exactly what that looks like, so we have a placeholder in for a new unit of process at Rock Creek when that actually does come down. So it does include potential new units of process as they're required from a regulatory perspective, but by and large, it's things like lining our system, replacing mains, moving them out of stream banks, increasing capacity in lines that are known to be short on capacity and things, those types of projects, taking care of the collection system. And just for a gauge, we have roughly 615 miles, give or take, of sanitary sewer main in the ground and 13 lift stations that pump sewage to treatment, plus the Rock Creek treatment plant, which averages roughly 7 million gallons of sewage treatment a day, is designed to do 10 million a day, and in a rain event, like we've experienced recently, unfortunately too much, can do 30 million gallons of treatment a day. And then we also have 20 million gallons of storage tanks, 4 different storage tanks to store 20 million gallons of sewage in a wet weather event like that. So it is the maintenance, repair, and replacement of all of that infrastructure.
Okay, my next question is for Alex. Just because not the average bear speaks finance, so consumer price index is what you're talking about for CPI, which is kind of a collection of things that you spend your money on, and the feds say, you know, this is bread and steak and toilet paper. We think those things make the basket of goods, and that's how we determine CPI. CPIU is a subset of that. Have you seen people do a cost escalator where it's CPI never to exceed 3%, or so that if we get one of these killers, we're at 12%, we can't make people eat that kind of cost increase? So help me how they've done that in other communities.
Yeah, most definitely. Like I mentioned before, it's strictly a matter of policy, and so you could decide to craft that any way that you thought made the most sense for your community. I think putting a cap on it is a fantastic idea to make sure that you're not being too punitive in the assessment of a rate increase.
Are there other ways that they do it where if it exceeds, I'll put some arbitrary number in there, 7% or 12%, that requires an additional vote of the council? I'm just curious how people have constructed their policy.
That's a fantastic question. I don't have a lot of examples at my fingertips, but I think with some research, I might be able to find some.
Very good. I will actually ask you to follow up with that because I think we could use some examples as we're thinking about this, but thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Please proceed.
Thank you. This may be for Lisa, but so you're recommending option 1. And the last sentence is creates more financial resiliency for unknown future costs. I'm wondering if you can talk, I think that's important, if you can talk more about that and maybe what, an example of an unknown future cost.
Yeah, a perfect one is one that Lisa referenced a moment ago, which is phosphorus removal. And so we see kind of an unknown uncertainty around the timing at which the EPA might say, thou shalt do phosphorus removal by said date. And that can be a substantial cost because it's new technology at the treatment plant to achieve those kind of effluent limits. So by way of regulatory pressure, that's one example. Another one is just in recent years, what we've seen is increased pressure in the labor market. So people, chemicals, those are other substantial operating costs that are increasing faster than that of the kind of the CPIU costs.
Thank you.
Very good. Anyone else? Please proceed.
Follow-up question. So you said we hadn't had any rate increases since 2020, correct? So did you, and you may not have, and that's okay, but did you do any analysis to say, had we been increasing by CPI, during that time frame, we wouldn't be in the fix we're in, having to increase quite as much? I mean, that's logical that would happen, but I'm just curious.
No, sir, we did not do any such analysis in the scope of this
Yeah,
study.
I know it wasn't, I didn't expect you did. I just thought I'd ask, so, all right, thanks.
Anyone else? Other further questions? Going once, going twice? All right. Alex, thank you very much. Great presentation. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And there's no other further questions. Mr. City Manager, anything to wrap us up for this evening?
We thought that was as much fun as you should have in one night, so that's all we have this evening.
Thank you for sparing us that much fun. Thank you all. We'll call this meeting adjourned.